Hi there, YouTube. Guild Mouse here, and we're on the road again. Now, aside from the awesome song that represents, I wanted to talk to our new and older players about being on the road, traveling on the road, riding on the road, walking on the road, rolling on the road, being a wanderer maybe. There are things you can do while you're on the road, and not a lot of people utilize this in their gameplay. One of the greatest advantages to being on the road and role-playing being on the road is that you can build relationships while you're doing it. Even if it's a love-hate relationship, or a love-love relationship, or a hate-hate relationship, because people are people, your opinions are going to differ, la la la. Something that I've noticed a lot, especially with new players, is they don't really know what to do about all that free time of some DMs don't skip over travel time. So they'll go da 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 da, and you're done, you're there. Some of them, like Guildmaster Dan, makes us roleplay some of it out, so he can establish what our habits are, how we interact with each other, if we interact with each other, and things like that. So, just a couple of things to keep in mind while you're traveling. One, it's okay to talk to your players. Always, 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 I will stress that communication is key, not just out of game, but in game. How can you develop a relationship with somebody if they never speak a word? Now, you're gonna argue with me, well, my character's mute, so I can't speak a word, so nobody can clearly develop a relationship with me. Wrong. Sometimes actions speak louder than words. And even mute people can communicate. There are forms of sign language in any game. It can be incorporated. Some DMs even include just ASL in it, or what's acceptable. Sometimes you do have to speak it, but that's okay. Verbal skills aside, it gets cold at night. Who can you share your tent with or your blanket with? And having just a general conversation about, well, I think that orcs are pretty stand-up people when given a chance. And then somebody looks at you and goes, are you insane? But then you have to take into account that not all half-breeds are a representation of, or a result of rape. So, hey! Or the elves talking down about some dwarves, because we're gonna go for some obvious stereotypes. And the halfling's like, so you're a jerk, and this is why you're a jerk. Or the dwarf and the elf just bickering back and forth, or another elf having an opposing opinion, which would start such fun. Communicating with your party members as a character is awesome, because you learn stuff, and you establish hierarchies, and possibly leadership, because someone just taking control in the middle of a fight is not enough. Teams fall apart without communication and without anybody really knowing or understanding. You need to build a relationship, and you can, of course, do that in the tavern. You can do that, I guess you could do it in a dungeon. I mean, some dungeons are longer than others. You can do that mid-adventure, like, oh, Petey the light-fingered gnome didn't steal the shiny. He must be a stand-up guy. What you didn't see was Petey the light-fingered gnome not taking the shiny, because that would be too obvious. Things like that color the opinions of your character. So another thing you can do when you're traveling is you can hunt. Oh my gosh. Have you ever been on a long camping trip and you only brought cold food with you? I don't know about you guys, but in real life, I have been. We went to the ocean. We caught some fish. We roasted said fish. We caught a crab and we boiled it, and it was miraculously good, though their dying screams were horrible. Regardless, If you have somebody in your party who can hunt, who can fish, who can trap, let them. Please let them. Because rations run out. Rations don't last all the time, and hopefully your party is big enough to handle if they bag a deer. Don't expect to be able to tan the hide, and don't try to carry around the pelt when it's still meaty. That would be a waste. Hunting. Now let's talk about cooking. Having somebody in your party who knows to gut the rabbit before you cook it would be a great boon to your party, because did you know you can get sick if you cook the intestines of the animal that you intend to eat, because, you know, there's stuff in it that you probably shouldn't be eating. Don't boil the rabbit in the pot without, you know, skinning and dressing it. Yeah. So, hunting is something you can do, and you could actually use that as a team building, because if you have 2 hunters or somebody who has exceptionally good eyesight and another person who's exceptionally good shot, there you go. You can have the sniper and the caller feel to it. Something to do on the road is at nighttime, set up watches. What are watches? Well, it's kind of when the night guard stands on the tower every night, making sure that the White Walkers don't come. Kind of like that. You don't want to get snuck up on by wolves, or by other travelers, or by orcs. Now, how am I going to get snuck on up by on a wolf? Well, they're quiet. You could get bitten by a snake in your sleep, because you guys are quiet, you're warm, and snakes like to cuddle up to things that are warm. But if you have somebody who's on watch that's looking for things slithering around in the grass, or listening for howls and paw pads, or, you know, hoo, 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 someone's probably going to catch that. I always suggest choosing between 3 and 4 people to do the watch rounds. 4 people ideally, because that way everybody can get enough sleep. 2-hour shifts each. Don't try and put your spellcasters in those normal rotations if you can help it, because in the event that your spellcaster is tapped for magic, they need between 6 and 8 hours. I think it's a full 8, depending on the system, to get their magic back, to get their spells replenished. Otherwise, you know, they no longer have any magic missiles, and you could have used those, and oh man. More things to do on the road. Play the green glass door until you get into town. Games like word games, especially in games with settings with medieval-esque feels to them, or where there's a lot of paranoia set up, playing games like the green glass door will get you killed. Ask Guildmaster Dan. He didn't die, but that's a whole other story. Thumbs up for Guildmaster Dan telling that story on tabletop. So, there are games that you can play and games that you shouldn't play. It's kind of up to you. Gambling for money or, you know, trinkets or things like that, those are always fun to do. Usually when you're just, you know, chilling, waiting for sleep to come during the downtime. Training weapon care. Guys, I cannot stress to you enough, weapon care. If you are a fighter and you don't take care of your weapon, but you've been like hacking through kobolds all day, your sword is gross. It's gross. It's got viscera, and you haven't cleaned it unless you're like, I wipe my blade at the end of every fight. That's good. You still need to sharpen your sword. You still need to maintain it. It can break. Your weapons can break. Archers still have to restring their bows, because those wear out over time. You can't have that kind of friction and knot. Daggers snap or lose their sharpness. Even the tools that a rogue uses to pick a door can become dull and therefore ineffective, or they can get weak and snapped easier. Tool maintenance is important. Do inventory of your stock every night. See who needs something, see who doesn't need something or could spare a little bit. Tiny tummies like gnomes and halflings. A full day's ration for a gnome or a halfling, depending on whether or not you're playing a hobbit halfling or a high fantasy halfling. And yes, they're both high fantasies, but there is a difference. The hobbits, they needs the foodses. It's for their hairs on their toeses. They need that food, second breakfast, third breakfast, brunch, they need that. They could easily out-eat a dwarf, if you want to go for stereotypes. But small tummies have a tendency to not need as much food. A normal human ration is equivalent to a gnome for 2 whole meals, like two days worth of rations, if they have the human-sized portions. If they have their own size portions, then no touchy. Most DMs and GMs don't make that difference. I do when I run in the rareness, because why would you carry around the extra weight if you didn't need to? That said, that you could just, portion off your human-sized stuff to the equivalent, but if you have a horse, a pony, a mule, a donkey, a dog, a familiar, a companion pet, any of those things, you need to feed them. You need to feed them, or you need to let them hunt. You need to water them, or they need to water themselves, and that's harder if there's no water source. You need to be able to provide for your familiars, your companions, or your beasts of burden, because they'll die. They will die. They die. Things die. Animals die if you neglect them. Some DMs are just like, oh no, they have like a magic ring of sustenance. That's cool. Ring of sustenance says that you don't feel hungry, you don't feel thirsty, because those needs are taken care of. What happens if the ring is dispelled? What happens if it breaks? What happens if your horse loses the ear that it's on and you don't think to notice about it? Check your animals for, in the case of hooves, check their hooves, make sure that the frog is clean, brush them, because all of those things, you could be preventing them from having bloat fly, and not all DMs get into this kind of detail. Some do. But it's always good to establish good traveling habits, like I wake up in the morning, I put my armor back on, because who's going to sleep in armor? You're not going to get good sleep if you do. Unless you're clothy. You sleep in robes, you wear robes all the time, you're just going to smell a little. Because you sweat a lot. Unless it's winter. Even then you sweat, because you're moving. You put your armor back on, you eat your breakfast, you check your weapons, and make sure that there's no moisture damage to stuff that shouldn't have moisture damage. Priests gotta pray in the morning. Wizards gotta look over their spellbook in the morning. Sorcerers gotta make sure their familiar's not dead. And just be like, holla. There are tons of things to do in the morning. Tons of things to act out. I was in a campaign where our cleric, every morning during prayer, wrote out their prayer and handed it to the DM, and every now and again their god would hear them and something cool would happen, like they would feel happy all day, or they would feel like somebody was protecting them all day, or something like that. Just an emotional feel, no true, bonus to it, but still just as important to feel like someone's got your back, bro. But you can establish somebody's got your back just by developing relationships within your party through communication. I moved to the mic. Just through communication, just through playing some gambling games, hopefully not for keepsies unless you want to go serious. And that's just on the road. Not even a brief deviation is going to a tavern. I'm going to cover taverns later, because there's a lot of tavern-y stuff that isn't paid close attention to, and we're just focusing on party aspects right now. Going to a tavern, sharing a room with your party members, because sometimes the bartender or the tavern keeper doesn't require you to pay per person, just per room, which is lovely. Sometimes sleeping in the barn, if they have one, is a lot cheaper. I'd sleep in the barn anyways, because it's cheaper. And nobody really pays attention to when you come or go, but that's, rogue tendencies, holla. Drinking contests. keeping it friendly or for keeps. Sometimes those can go really wrong. Just ask anybody I've played a game with. Drinking contests, singing contests, gambling, any of those. I thought I heard my phone. Any of those things will help you build a relationship, and it's considered on the road because usually you stop at a tavern just for a brief rest and maybe a bath if they have that availability, which is, a wash tub, and they go boil some kettles of water and throw that stuff in. Woo! Hot water! You haven't experienced such a great experience in your life. Sometimes bathing together can be okay. In a non-sexual or sexual fashion, whichever floats your boat. Remember, some people have triggers and are uncomfortable, so I don't know. Keep it PG if you can. I don't know. It depends on the maturity of your group. That's another thing to talk about. Intimate relationships can develop within the party. And something I cannot stress enough is if you develop an intimate relationship with your cleric, make sure that your cleric has enough of a brain to love everybody enough equally. I'm not talking about polygamy. I'm talking about healing everybody, not just you. Communicating with your party allows you to establish leadership, and in the sense of leadership this is the person that we draw the most strength from. It could be your cleric who is soft-spoken, always listens. It could be your fighter who pushes you just enough so that not only will you do the thing, but you'll do the thing for you, not because they told you to. You need somebody to motivate the group without suffocating. And that can be hard because sometimes you get a group full of leaders. Sometimes you get a group full of people who don't want to lead. Or the ones that I've found tend to be more successful is a rotation of leadership. The cleric would be more knowledgeable in things involving the undead, while a fighter would be potentially more capable of handling a horde of goblins. A ranger, stampede! Things like that. A marching order is something to keep in mind when you're traveling. I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, but marching order is something that's really important to remember along with everything else. Because you don't want your cleric at the end of the line. You want to try and keep your healers towards the middle of the party. And now you're going to say, well, that's not fair, because what if I don't want to stand at the end? That's great, but you also need to keep in mind that those in your party that may or may not be so inclined to draw a weapon first, in sign of danger, or run, which is another super important thing that we're going to talk about in another video, or be compelled to run from danger if they're not able, need to be protected. Yes, I know. Priests don't have to be protected, or clerics don't need to be protected. The healer doesn't need to be protected because they're just as capable a fighter as anybody else. They just know how to use the bandages and have the, 911 call from wherever their deity comes from. Truth of the matter is, they have the least amount of armor. Strategically, it's always good to keep your healer on your good side. Same way to always keep your berserker on a good side. But don't put him in the middle. Put him in the back. Or in the front, depending on which way you want him or her to charge. Your scout, usually your rogue or a ranger or a fighter who feels compelled to do it, they could use their range ahead of you, mostly 60 some odd feet, to hunt because they're ahead enough of the group that the noise of the group hasn't carried on. They can signal in various ways to let people know that, hey, there's a thing coming, be it a cart, an enemy, a dragon. I think everybody would hear the dragon about the same time. But you get my drift, I'm sure. The marching order, say you have 6 people, fighter at the front and the end, squishy in the middle, go from there. Put your players in tactical positions. If you have a person of interest in your group, for example, you're escorting a noble, keep your noble in the middle. Don't put them at the front. Don't put them in the back. put them in the middle. So we've covered a lot of things, and I hope that this was helpful for you guys, just to kind of see all the things that you can do while you're traveling. In majority, it's just talking. It is talking like you would talk with anybody else. Maybe not in an elevator, maybe not on a jog, but maybe in a bar. Like, hey baby, you fall from heaven? What? Or, I don't know. I don't hit on people in bars. I don't know what these people say anymore. You people. I don't know what y'all say anymore. Just communicate with people. So, I saw you fell down in that last fight. I'm glad you got up. Hey, communication. Man, I am so glad I got up too, right? That's it. That's, and even going from there, so I have an idea to help stop you from falling. Is it to pick up my skirts? Maybe. Like, something that simple. Have a conversation with people. Play some games. Just do the thing. If you're unsure about what to do, especially when you're traveling, just do the thing. Find out what happens. I have a tendency to run off the road or stare. I pick flowers and make crowns as we walk. It's a conversation piece, especially when you start putting flowers in the dwarves' hair. But that's just me. Maybe you have something else that you like to do when you're traveling. I would love to hear your guys' opinions on traveling and what you guys do when you're traveling. So that's my video. It was really long. Thanks for holding on in there. And next time, we're going to talk about taverns. Bye. That was awkward. I know that this was a really long video, and I'm really happy that you guys hung out with me this long for after the credits, because I'm working on getting my special videos up for, well, planned out at least, for classes. And I talked about it in my last video, but I'm going to give you like a brief rundown real quick and my afterthoughts. Excuse me. I'm covering base class base race from Dungeons & Dragons, base class base race from Warhammer 40,000, and I need one more setting. Well, and admittedly in 40k, it's humans doing a bunch of different classes, so we'll be really talking about the classes, but I would really like to talk about that third one, but I'm not sure what it is. The really thing that I can only think of that's left for me is Lovecraftian horror, but I'm not really, or vampires, and I'm not really sure which one I would go for, because in majority Lovecraftian is humans, and then we're doing all the jobs that are possible in the world. So I'd love to hear you guys' y'all's thoughts on this. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Thank you guys so much for your participation last time. It was really awesome to see so many voices. I'm still obviously new to this. Guildmaster Dan's been doing this forever, and I'm still pretty new. I'm enjoying it though, and this gushing proud little aside, I love your shiny happy faces, as I said before, and I shall always say, remember, keep talking, and catch you later. Thanks. Bye.